Every month, somewhere in your house, a drawer full of dead batteries is quietly mocking you. Double A's, triple A's, those bloated lithium packs you pulled from an old laptop. You toss them in there because replacing them felt like the obvious move. Walk into a store, grab a fresh pack off the shelf, tap your card, move on, and nobody ever stops to ask the one question that would unravel the entire racket. What exactly am I paying for? Here's the part that should make your stomach turn. The raw copper in a single penny, the aluminum in a scrap of foil from your kitchen, a splash of vinegar sitting in your pantry right now, those three things combined produce electricity. Not theoretical electricity, not some cute science class demonstration that fizzles out before it matters. Real measurable voltage, half a volt per cell, stacking upward every time you add another layer. 10 layers deep, and you're sitting at 5 or 6 volts, enough to fire up a small LED, enough to prove that the power you have been buying was never as exotic as the price tag suggested. Think about that for a second. The device in your pocket, the car in your driveway, the toothbrush in your bathroom counter, they all run on the same principle a bored person discovered on a rainy Saturday afternoon by rummaging through kitchen junk. 2 different metals, something acidic between them, and a wire. That is the entire secret. Electrons flow from one metal to the other, and you get current. The wider the gap between those 2 metals on the electrochemical scale, the more voltage you pull. It has worked this way for over 100 years, and the fundamental chemistry has barely shifted. What has shifted, dramatically, is how much you are charged for the finished product. Picture the person who actually sat down and tried it. Pennies spread across a countertop, a roll of aluminum foil torn into small squares, paper towels cut to size, soaking in plain white vinegar. One cell goes down. Penny, wet towel foil. Then another on top. No soldering iron, no circuit board, no trip to any store. Just layering, like building a strange little sandwich. By the 12th layer, a tiny LED blinks on, and suddenly the illusion cracks wide open. The thing powering that light cost virtually nothing. The materials were already in the house. The knowledge was never hidden. It was just never presented in a way that made you feel like it belonged to you. And that is the real lie worth examining. Not that batteries are complicated, they are embarrassingly simple. The lie is that you were trained to see energy storage as someone else's domain, a product you consume, never a principle you command. Every time you grabbed a pack of batteries off a rack without thinking, you were reinforcing a story the supply chain wrote for you. A story where curiosity is a hobby and convenience is the only rational choice. Meanwhile, the gap between what raw materials cost and what you hand over at the register is where quiet fortunes get built, just not yours. Now, the deeper you push into this, the more the ordinary stuff around you starts to look different. Those pennies are not just coins. That foil is not just for leftovers. Even the vinegar under your sink becomes a working electrolyte the moment you understand what it actually does at a molecular level. You start seeing your kitchen less like a room and more like an unlocked warehouse of components, coins, and some kitchen supplies. That is genuinely all it takes to cross a line most people never even realize exists. So the natural next question hits, is any of this actually safe to do at home? And the honest answer might surprise you, because the risk is not where you think it is. Here's the thing. Nobody talks about when they toss a dead battery into that drawer. You just threw away money, not metaphorical money, actual, calculable, exposed on a balance sheet money. A single alkaline AA battery contains roughly 11 grams of zinc and a sleeve of manganese dioxide. The zinc alone, at current commodity prices, runs about $1.20 per pound. Do the math on that. The raw metal inside one AA is worth a fraction of a cent, yet you paid somewhere between 50 cents and $1 for it off the shelf. That is a markup north of 1,000%, and nobody blinks because the package has a trusted brand name and a picture of a bunny on it. Multiply that across every battery-powered device in your house. The TV remote, the wall clock, the kid's toy that screams at 6 in the morning, the smoke detectors, the wireless mouse. The average American household burns through about 47 single-use batteries a year. At roughly 75 cents each, that is $35 annually, just to keep small things blinking and beeping. $35 does not sound like a lot until you realize the chemical ingredients for all 47 of those batteries could fit in a sandwich bag and cost you less than a cup of coffee. Now, rewind that clock 224 years. Alessandro Volta stacked discs of copper and zinc, separated them with cardboard soaked in salt water, and created the first reliable source of on-demand electricity. Copper discs docked zinc discs, salt water. That is it. The entire electrical age, every phone charger, every car ignition, every city-scale energy storage bank, traces its bloodline back to a pile of common metals and kitchen-grade salt. Volta did not have a factory. He did not have a supply chain. He had a table, some coins worth of metal, and a question. And here is the part that should sting a little. The penny sitting in your couch cushion right now is 97.5% zinc with a thin copper shell. One commenter actually asked whether you could separate the zinc from the copper on a penny and use each piece independently. The answer is yes, and the fact that a single coin contains both electrodes for a working voltaic cell tells you something uncomfortable about how much you have been overpaying for packaged chemistry. Picture your kitchen table, a strip of aluminum foil, a few post-1982 pennies, a paper towel soaked in white vinegar. The aluminum surrenders electrons more eagerly than copper, so when you bridge them with a wire, current flows. Not a lot. Enough to light a small LED, enough to prove the principle, but the principle is the expensive part. That tiny flicker on your table is the same electrochemical reaction happening inside the battery pack you paid $14 for last week. The difference is packaging, branding, and the fact that most people never bother to look at what is actually inside the cylinder. Someone in the comments wanted to know how many homemade cells it would take to run a water heater for a week. That question sounds naive, but it is actually the right question asked at the right scale, because it forces you to confront the real arithmetic of energy cost. A typical electric water heater draws around 4,500 watts. Running it for a week demands roughly 750 kilowatt hours. To generate that from penny and foil cells, producing half a volt each at a few milliamps, you would need an absurd number of cells, tens of thousands, maybe more. The exercise is not meant to replace your utility bill. It is meant to expose the gap between what raw chemistry can do and what you are charged for the convenience of having someone else package it. That gap is where the profit lives, and it is enormous. So the next time you reach for a pack of batteries at the checkout counter, understand what you're actually buying. You are not buying zinc, you're not buying chemistry, you're buying the fact that you never questioned the cost. And once you see that, you start wondering what else on your shelf follows the same pattern, which is exactly where things get interesting. Because swapping out materials changes the equation in ways the price tag never warned you about. Here's the part that stings when you actually do the math. You are sitting at your kitchen table, swapping pennies for nickels, trying zinc washers instead of aluminum foil, squeezing lemon juice onto paper towels, and every time the multimeter ticks up a fraction of a volt. It feels like progress. It feels like you cracked something. But zoom out for a second and look at this scene from the other side of the ledger. The zinc in that washer did not appear out of thin air. Somebody pulled it from the ground in Peru or Australia, processed it through a smelter, shipped it across an ocean, and sold it to a hardware store where you paid retail. The copper in that penny went through the same chain. The vinegar, the salt, even the multimeter in your hand. Every single component traveled through a supply line owned by someone who is not you, and that someone collected a margin at every stop. This is the part of the battery story nobody frames as a financial diagram. You stack 5 cells, 10 cells, 15 cells. The voltage climbs. The LED glows brighter. You feel like a backyard inventor beating the system, but the system already got paid before you twisted the first wire. The metals you're experimenting with are commodities, traded on exchanges you will never sit at. Zinc futures, copper futures. These prices are set in London and Chicago by traders who have never held a galvanized nail in their lives. They do not need to build anything. They own the position on the raw input. And every time, global demand for batteries ticks upward and their portfolio thickens while your hardware store receipt gets a little longer. Think about what happens when you try to scale your little kitchen experiment. You want to power something bigger than an LED, maybe a small clock, maybe a tiny motor. So you cut larger pieces of metal, soak thicker towels, wire stacks in parallel like a miniature power grid on your countertop. And it works, sort of. But the current drops, the resistance climbs. You burn through electrolyte faster. You need more zinc, more copper, more acid. Every attempt to extract more energy costs you more material, and every piece of material has a price tag attached to a supply chain you do not control. You're running a tiny chemical factory, sure, but you're buying all your inputs at retail and selling the output to yourself at zero. Now picture the person on the other end. The company that manufactures the AAA batteries in your TV remote did not start by experimenting with pennies. They started by locking down supply agreements for refined zinc and manganese dioxide at bulk rates you will never see. They engineered the internal resistance out of the cell so the current stays stable. They stamped a brand on the wrapper and marked the price up several hundred% over raw material cost. When you buy a pack of batteries at the checkout counter, you're not paying for chemistry. You're paying for the ownership structure that sits between the mine and your flashlight. The chemistry is almost free. The access is what costs you. That is the value layer hiding underneath every experiment you run on your kitchen table. You can swap metals all day, try every electrolyte in your pantry, seal cells into old pill bottles, and call them portable. The knowledge is real. The physics is real. But the economic architecture around batteries was never designed for the person holding the multimeter. It was designed for the person holding the deed to the zinc deposit. And the wider the gap between those two positions, the more every volt you generate at home is really just a demonstration of how far you sit from the actual asset. The chemistry has not changed in over a century, and neither has that distance. Here is the thing nobody tells you when they hand you a budget spreadsheet or a savings app with confetti animations. Knowing where your money goes and actually rerouting it are two completely different chemical reactions. You can stare at a bank statement the same way you can stare at a pile of pennies and vinegar on your kitchen counter. The ingredients are right there, but until you physically separate the copper from the zinc, until your fingers actually touch the foil and press it against the wet paper towel, nothing happens. No current flows, no LED flickers. Your financial life works on the exact same principle, and the people who sell you wealth advice have zero interest in admitting how small the real first move actually is. Forget the 5-year plan, forget the diversified portfolio talk. Forget every guru who tells you to visualize abundance while your checking account quietly bleeds out through subscriptions you forgot you signed up for. Picture instead a guy named John sitting in his kitchen at 11 at night, wondering how many batteries it would take to run his water heater for a week. That question sounds absurd until you realize he's doing something most people never do. He's measuring the actual cost of a single specific thing he uses every day, not the vague idea of expenses. One device, 1 week, one honest number. That is your move. Not a strategy, not a philosophy. A single, boring, unsexy action you can do tonight in less than 10 minutes. Pick one bill, just one, the way you would pick one pair of metals for your first battery experiment. Your electric bill, your streaming stack, your grocery receipt from last Tuesday, pull it up on your phone. Do not look at the total. Totals are designed to make your eyes glaze over. Instead, find the one-line item you cannot justify to a stranger with a straight face. Maybe it is the premium tier of a service you use on the free tier's worth of attention. Maybe it is the convenience fee you pay because you never switched to autopay. Maybe it is the $14 a month for a cloud storage plan still holding photos from a phone you threw away 2 years ago. Circle that line, cancel it, downgrade it, or call and renegotiate it. One line, one action. Done. You are not saving your way to wealth. You are doing something far more dangerous to your old habits. You are proving to your own nervous system that the money flowing out of your life is not a river you watch from the bank. It is a series of tiny valves, and you can reach down and turn any one of them. The same way pulling apart a penny and pressing copper against zinc teaches your hands that voltage is not magic. Killing one pointless charge on your statement teaches your gut that bleeding money is not inevitable. Most people will never do this, not because it is hard, but because it is boring. There's no dopamine hit in downgrading a subscription. No one posts a screenshot of saving $6 a month, but that is exactly why it works. The flashy moves, the stock tips, the crypto whispers, those are the financial equivalent of trying to power your whole house off a stack of pennies. Impressive to talk about, useless in practice. The person who quietly audits one line item every single week, who treats each small leak like a failed experiment worth understanding. That person builds a kind of compound awareness that no app or advisor can replicate. Each week the number is small, but the muscle gets stronger. And after a few months, you're not the same person staring at the same statement. You are someone who knows exactly which valves are open, which ones you chose to leave open, and which ones you shut with your own hands. That is the real current running underneath all of this, not the voltage that lights up a single LED for a few impressive seconds, but the slow, steady discipline of paying attention to what is actually on the wire. So here's the part where most channels would tell you this one simple trick will change your life forever. That your savings will compound into a fortune by next Tuesday, that you are 3 spreadsheet columns away from early retirement on a beach somewhere. I am not going to do that. Because the honest truth, the one that actually respects your intelligence, is that most of what you just learned will not make you rich. It was never supposed to. Think about what we actually built here. We took ordinary materials, stuff already sitting in your kitchen, and we squeezed a small current out of them. Not enough to power a house, not enough to run your car. Barely enough to light a single dim bulb for a few hours before the paper towels dried out and the whole thing went dead. That is exactly what your first real budget looks like. You rearrange the pieces you already have, you get a tiny flicker of surplus, and then life corrodes the connections. The car breaks down, the dentist bill lands, the vinegar evaporates, so to speak, and you are back to zero wondering what went wrong. Nothing went wrong. That flicker was the point. The first batteries ever built were just as crude, just as temporary, and every single one of them failed. Volta's original pile corroded within hours. Faraday's early cells leaked, but each failure taught the next builder where the energy was actually leaking, and that is the only promise I am willing to make to you right now. Not that your money will multiply while you sleep, but that every single time you track where your dollars actually went this month, you're finding one more leak, one more place where the current was draining into nothing. Here's your exit ramp, and I mean this. If everything we talked about today feels like too much, If the numbers are overwhelming, or the whole idea of dissecting your spending makes your chest tight, you have full permission to close this video and never come back. Seriously, no guilt. No algorithm trick where I tell you the secret is in the next episode. You can walk away right now, and the only thing I would ask you to do is this one absurdly small thing before you go. Pull up your bank statement from last month. Not to budget, not to plan. Just look at the 3 largest charges that were not rent or food. Just look at them. Let them sit in your brain for 10 seconds. You do not have to cancel anything. You do not have to feel bad. You just have to see them the way you would notice a loose wire in a circuit you built with your own hands. That is your survival buffer. Not a 6-month emergency fund, not some fantasy number a financial guru pulled out of a hat. Your buffer starts the moment you can look at your own spending without flinching. Because once you can do that, once you can stare at the numbers without your brain immediately changing the subject, you have something most people never build. You have awareness of where your current is actually flowing. And awareness compounds in a way that no savings account ever will. It compounds into better questions. Better questions compound into slightly different choices. Slightly different choices, repeated over months, not days, are what eventually turn a crude pile of pennies and vinegar into something that can actually hold a charge. Nobody is coming to rescue your finances. No video, including this one, is going to hand you a formula that bypasses the slow, unglamorous work of paying attention. But you do not need rescue. You just need to keep noticing. Keep finding the leaks.